All right, good evening, everybody. It's a little bit after 7, so I think we'll... I need my gavel, apparently. I don't know where it is. All right, good evening, everyone. If people could start settling down. I think it's a little after 7. It looks like everybody's finally settled in. This is a wonderful turnout, so thank you so much for coming out on what feels like the first real night of winter tonight. I'm Katie Green. I'm chair of the Board of Selectmen and chair of the 348-364 Main Street Master Planning Committee, and welcome to the public forum for that property. Tonight, I'm here with Selby, the town's Land Use and Economic Development Director, also a mouthful. Tonight we are going to talk a little bit about the property, what we've done since our last public forum a little over a year ago, an RFI that we released and the results that we got back from that, and then seek public input on a few proposals that the committee wanted to bring forward tonight, and then we'll talk about next steps and where we're going from there. So just to start, the committee is made up of 9, I believe, members from different boards and committees. Again, I represent the Board of Selectmen. Some of the committee members are here tonight, so when I say your name, and if you are here, would you mind just raising your hand? So from the Acton Housing Authority, Ryan Betez, who's back in the back there. From the Green Advisory Board, Cameron Cousins, who's in the back over there. From the Historical Commission, Doug Herrick, who I know couldn't make it tonight. From the Finance Committee, Mike Majors, who's in the front. And then we have 3 at-large members, Ann Chang, next to Mike, David Brown, and Bill Mullen. So thank you, everybody, for coming. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Selby to start.
Thanks a lot for coming, everybody. My name is Selby. It's my last name, but it's the name I use. And I am the town's Land Use and Economic Development Director, and I have been here for 3 years at this point. And one of the committees that I was asked to work with shortly after I arrived was this new committee, the 348 to 364 Main Street Master Planning Committee. And Katie's had the honor of chairing that committee for the last 2.5 years. I think we've kind of been at this project. So I'm going to bring you through, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you through what the committee has done up until the point where we issued an RFI, and then Katie's going to take it from there on. Oh, that was the wrong button. All right, so those who don't know where this property is located, let me orient you. This is Route 27, north to south here, or going kind of east to west here. This is Route 2 that's cutting through. So this is basically at the intersection on the north, I guess that's the whatever side. The west, thank you very much. On the west side of Route 27, north of Route 2. So right there at that interchange. People might know Kennedy Landscaping as the landmark for this property, and also the open area that's to the south of Kennedy Landscaping's property. So the committee was formed in August of 2016. That's the point at which the Board of Selectmen created a charge to create this committee. It includes members of a bunch of other committees in the town, including the Board of Selectmen, the Economic Development Committee, the Finance Committee, the Green Advisory Board, the Housing Authority, Acton 2020, the Historical Commission, and a couple of at-large members. The committee started meeting in August, probably had 3 or 4 meetings bantering about various ideas that committee members had for potential uses for this property. And at one point, they decided that it was time to hire a designer to help visualize some of the ideas that the committee was having for this property. So they hired Dennis Dale, landscape architect and designer, to work with the committee to visualize some of their ideas. And a public forum was hosted in June of 2017. 5 options were presented to the folks that came to that forum on that night. The first was a by right development, which would be approximately 7 single-family houses. One project that looked at multi-family housing and open space, townhomes and a marketplace, a boutique inn, and the idea of optimizing the existing land use. So what these looked like, I'll just briefly go through these. This was what the single-family layout would potentially look like: 7 single-family homes, a couple lots created out of what's known as approval not required, and a small 4-lot subdivision. So that's what we believe that is the by right use of this property, because it's zoned Residence 2. This schematic shows Multifamily housing at the portion of the property that's occupied by Kennedy Landscaping currently, and utilizing the existing open area as open space. And also, that's probably where the septic system will go. As part of the process, we reviewed all of the plans that were designed or created for the proposed daycare that was denied. So that area that reads leaching field there was the area that was chosen for the septic system for that use. So that's what we were assuming where the septic system would go for any development that might take place on this property. The third scenario that was reviewed was a combination of townhouses and a marketplace, so keeping some kind of commercial use active at that location when Kennedy's been there for quite a long time with his retail use. Trying to enhance that was this idea. This scenario showed a boutique inn. The idea was to try to replicate what the Colonial Inn in Concord might look like, or if anybody has seen the new Groton Inn, which was redeveloped. The historic Groton Inn burned down. A 60-room inn was recently redeveloped right in downtown Groton on 119 with a 5,000 square foot restaurant behind it. So that's more or less what this concept was showing. And then there's the idea of just enhancing the existing land use and basically land banking the property until a larger, greater public use might present itself. So that's what this one shows, is basically cleaning up the property and continuing to operate a nursery in the section that's operated that way now. At the end of that forum, and there was a lot of information exchanged, a lot of questions asked, and a lot of input received from the folks who attended that forum. And at the end of that, we gave everybody one dot and asked them to put a dot on a particular scenario that they chose was their favorite. A lot of people chose to tear their dots in half and vote for 2. Or you can see they put their dots right in the middle of 2 options that they seem to prefer. So the count was, when we finally tallied all of these dots, and mind you, it's somewhat subjective given the placement of the dots, but the by right use for the single-family homes received 0 votes. The multifamily housing came in, I guess, third, with 10.5 votes. The townhomes and marketplace didn't receive any votes. The boutique restaurant and inn concept received the most at 17.5 votes, and doing nothing received the second number of votes at 13.5. So after that forum, I know you haven't heard from us for a while, but it's not because we haven't been doing work in the background. We have been. The committee has only met a few times, but that's because some of the work that we're doing takes a long time to complete. The first thing that was done was the Housing Authority appropriated some funds to do a feasibility study to see what would be fundable, what would be financing, what kind of project would be eligible to receive the financing to create a 100% affordable project. They looked at 10 units, and that was right out just from the cost of permitting. They looked at a 20-unit concept and a 31-unit concept. And at the end of the day, the conclusion was that a 31-unit senior affordable project is financially feasible on the property. We then wanted to look at the feasibility of a hotel. And this is something that I had never done before, but I started digging into it, visited a couple boutique inns, spoke to folks in the trades, tried to figure out what goes into doing a market analysis. And then I reached out to Mass Development, and I applied for and received a technical assistance grant to have them hire a professional who actually does this kind of work on a daily basis to do the hotel feasibility study. So they compiled all the information, they looked at all the things that you need to know about to determine whether or not a hotel would fly, and it just turns out that there are not the demand generators in this area to support a hotel, and even if we did have it, the numbers of rooms that they're building hotels at these days is not the 30 to 50 rooms that we were thinking about. It's more the 100 to 120 rooms with a Marriott or a Hyatt or a Radisson or a whatever branding on it. So I met with Mass Development after that. After that analysis was completed, a little, not upset, but disappointed that it wasn't going to work out. And she recommended that we issue, my contact at Mass Development recommended that we issue a request for information. Basically throw it out there and see to the development community, to whomever, what they feel would be a good concept for this property.
And so then we released that request for information on October 3rd of this year. And again, Selby mentioned we put it out there to try to get a sense of what developers or other groups or organizations thought would be feasible and that they could actually do, because we didn't want to go down the path of coming up with another idea that the community really liked, only to find out then that there wasn't anybody who would actually build it or do it. So we put that out there. Selby made sure to get it out to folks that he knew that have done various developments as well as others, and just putting it out more broadly. The responses were due back in November, early November, and then the Master Planning Committee met in late November to review the responses that we received. Sorry. In the RFI, the committee had laid out the sort of criteria upon which we wanted to review the proposals and the goals for the project at this land. And so we were asking them to respond and to tell us, to present a proposal that represented a thoughtful reuse of the parcel, something that they felt that our community wanted and needed, something that was feasible. So again, not just an idea, but something that they could show to us could actually be implemented financially, and that would fit on the site, you know, and taking into account the soils and other things like that. We wanted them to demonstrate what they would do to address environmental concerns. What would their proposal do to limit the environmental impact on the site and on the town. We want them to address the sustainability, both from a fiscal perspective as well as an environmental and social perspective. We want them to address the neighborhood concerns. So is this something that would be driving a lot of traffic? Again, part of the reason that we purchased this parcel in the first place is because of concerns related to the traffic that the daycare would have brought there. So we didn't want a similar proposal like a daycare. And then something that represented this parcel that the committee views in part as a sort of gateway to Acton Center. And so how was their proposal responsive to that? So we received 4 responses, and we'll go through each of these in a little more detail. So we received responses from the Acton Housing Authority, Now Communities, Winstanley Enterprises, and the Acton Dog Park Committee. So the Acton Housing Authority proposal, and I'm going to skip ahead once so you can see the picture, and then there are a few boards up here as well with some additional images, and then I will go back. So they're proposing to build a 31-unit, all affordable rental unit building that would be evocative of a country farmhouse, an inn, or a barn-type campus. Again, these designs are not final, but something to give an idea of what this could look like. It would be 31 units, 27 would be 1-bedroom, and 4 would be 2-bedroom units. They would all be designated for elderly or elderly disabled people. It would be a 3-floor building with elevator access so that it would be accessible, and it would be designed in a way to appear to be only 2.5 stories, even though in fact it's 3. The Housing Authority noted that there's currently a waiting list of 200 people on their waiting list for this kind of housing, and 88 of those live in Acton, so they demonstrated need. They also, in doing this, completed the financial feasibility analysis and hired the architects to test the feasibility to make sure it would fit on the site, and helped them come up with the designs before you tonight. And their proposal includes a $1 million payment to the town of Acton for acquisition of the land. Their financial proposal does include proposing to make a request to the Community Preservation Act for funding. That funding is in part designated for affordable housing use. So the committee, in reviewing this proposal, we sort of went through those, I think, 6 criteria that we had laid out and kind of determined whether we thought they met it or not. We didn't do a point range in each, but so we thought they met the thoughtful reuse, the feasibility, addressing environmental concerns as their proposal would be a LEED certified building, and the issues of sustainability. The next proposal, we had additional photos in there, is for Now Communities. Now Communities is proposing 16 single-family homes ranging from 1,650 to 2,400 square feet, and Now Communities are the folks that built the Concord Riverwalk, so if you know that development at all, it's similar in some ways to that. Their proposal includes 2 parking spaces per unit, but those would be in shared parking areas, and I think this photo, and again, some of the drawings up here relate to that, so you can see that as well. I'll let you see that and then go back to this. The proposal does provide areas for proposed community spaces, whether that's community gardens or a small dog park or other open space uses that the community would want included in there. They employ low-impact development techniques for building these, and their targeted purchase price, if they build 16 single-family market rate houses, would be $1.8 million. If they deed restrict some of the units to be affordable, they would still purchase the property for $1.8 million if they had 18 units where 2 were affordable, or they would purchase it for less, somewhere probably around the $1 to $1.1 million, if there were 16 units and 2 of those were deed restricted affordable. The committee gave this project points for feasibility, environmental concerns, sustainability, and addressing the issue of being a gateway to Acton's center. Those are some of the renderings. The next application that we received was for Winstanley Enterprises. They proposed 22 Cape-style single-family modular homes. They said that they would price these at what they refer to as affordable prices of between $375,000 and $450,000. Those are not deed-restricted affordable, though, so when you hear people talking about affordable housing and meeting our 10% goal of affordable housing, only the units that are deed restricted count towards that. So again, in the Acton Housing Authority proposal, the 31 units would count towards that. In the now one between 2 and 4 could potentially count towards that. None of these would. In some of the drawings they gave us, I don't think any of them are in here, yeah. The upstairs were unfinished, which I guess is a concept that people used to do where they would sell a house with an unfinished upstairs, but in some of these cases that meant all of the bedrooms were still unfinished. So, and they targeted purchasing the property at $500,000. So the committee didn't feel that this proposal was at the level of the previous 2, and we only thought it met the goal of being technically feasible with some concerns, again, with the units potentially being unfinished and other issues like that. And then the last proposal we received was from the Acton Dog Park Committee. So the Acton Dog Park Committee was proposing to put a dog park on 2 to 3 acres of the property, and showed that their proposal could be compatible with other uses. So for example, the existing use of Kennedy's, where they would put the dog park on the part that's currently open, or another use if we went with one of these other options that left the open space. So they showed 3 options of various ways they could configure the land to include the dog park with other uses. They said that they would require at least 20 parking spaces for that. They'd include separate areas for large and small dogs. There would be fencing and shade elements, walkways, water access, and all the other elements that they've determined are needed for the dog park in town. And they would not provide any funding to purchase the site because in doing that, if the town provides the land, then they qualify for a grant that would cover the design and construction costs of a dog park. So the committee gave this proposal also points on feasibility. And that's one of the concepts. So next steps, do this so I don't have to keep looking back. The committee voted to move forward tonight to bring 3 of those options three options before you. Two of the ones we just discussed, which were the Acton Housing Authority proposal and the Now Communities proposal, and then the third option of optimizing the current use, since that had received quite a few votes at the last public forum. So our goal is to gather feedback from the community tonight. We'll have questions and answers, and then hopefully do just a voting exercise, not with dots, but probably just by hands, with all of you tonight. And then the committee is scheduled to meet next week on January 15th with the hope of making a recommendation on one option and bringing that to the Board of Selectmen potentially in February for the Board of Selectmen's consideration, and with the Board of Selectmen's support, hopefully then bringing a warrant article to town meeting in April. And what that warrant article would look like would depend a little bit on what option we determine to go with, but would probably involve a vote to allow us to put out an RFP for a specific purpose. So we would write the RFP based on whatever proposal we determine to go with. So whether that's the Housing Authority, Now Communities, or the optimizing existing use wouldn't require that. So just, and I will leave this slide up because it has a summary of the proposals. Again, it's the Acton Housing Authority, which is proposing to purchase a property for $1 million, provide 31 units, all of which would be affordable. And these would be for senior and disabled people. We've estimated that the property taxes, annual property taxes for a project like this from the Housing Authority would be around $3,600. This project is compatible with the Acton Dog Park proposal, or it could be the open space area that's essentially where the open space currently is on that property could be used for a different purpose other than the dog park. The Now Communities, their purchase price, again, depending on the number of affordable units, is somewhere between 1 to 1.8 million, and it's 16 units, 0 to 2 of which would be affordable. We estimate, this is a rougher estimation, their annual property taxes around $200,000 a year, and there is an option for uses of open space, although a smaller portion of open space than in the Housing Authority proposal. And then finally, the sort of optimizing the existing use, we would not receive any money for that. There would obviously be no housing units, and it wouldn't generate any annual property taxes. We do currently have an annual lease with the Kennedy, with Kennedy Landscaping, which is valued at $18,000, although primarily we've been receiving that in product from him to use for trees and other things around town. And if he doesn't continue, then that lease wouldn't continue if his business closes. But it would leave open the option to change the use in the future. So those are generally this is the summary of the proposals. So the way I'd like to do it is just sort of open it up to public comment. And so if you want to come up to the podium, and if the first person doesn't mind just turning on the microphone, and then we'll leave it on. And if you just want to share your thoughts and comments, and then we will do, like I said, a voting exercise a little later tonight when everybody's had a chance to say what they'd like to say.
Michael Bialas, 80 Willow Street. I just clarification in presenting it, you said that the Acton housing proposal was for elderly housing and for disabled elderly. Is that true, that it's not open to other disabled people?
It's okay.
Elder
So Kelly,
and
just I'm just going to say it over the microphone because we are, and I should have mentioned that we are being filmed by ActonTV, and it's also on live streamed on Facebook on their website tonight. So it would be open to non-elder disabled people as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Pete Farmer. I live on Captain Brown's Lane. Ironically, I felt the same or had the same concern that the previous gentleman spoke about, that I think it's important to also include younger disabled people in the community.
Yes, I apologize. That was me misspeaking at the
But I just
Housing
wanted
Authority.
to echo
Yes.
it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob Van Meter, Half Moon Hill. I serve as Vice Chair of the Acton Community Housing Corporation, which has voted to support the Acton Housing Authority proposal. I also serve as Chair of Housing for All Acton, a new advocacy organization, which is also supporting the Housing Authority proposal. We think there's a strong need for housing, both for elders and for disabled people, and we think this project represents an important step in the right direction in making Acton a community with housing options for a wide variety of citizens. So I urge the committee to support the Housing Authority proposal.
Thank you, Bob.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Mike Rothbaum. I serve Congregation Beth Elohim here in Acton. It might be nice to have 16 houses where young families who have money could move in and support our congregant base. But we're also not just answerable to the bottom line, we're answerable to our textual tradition. As Jews, we know the first Jewish man named Abraham opened his tent on all sides to bring the homeless poor into his dwelling. We know our prophets, like Isaiah, said that the way to serve God is not with lots of genuflecting and lots of sacrifices, but by, again, bringing the homeless into space where they could live like human beings created in God's image. There's lots of discussion about why people don't live in appropriate housing. There's discussions about drug abuse and mental health. The biggest problem is that people don't have enough money to live in appropriate housing, especially in areas like Greater Boston. So speaking on behalf of my people and our tradition, we do hope that you'll consider our need to, as a society, to provide affordable housing for especially the elders among us and those with physical disabilities, but for all people who are created in God's image and deserve the right to livable housing. Thanks.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Hi, Sharon Mercurio. I'm not a resident, but I am speaking for the Council on Aging. I'm the director of the Senior Center. Worked very closely with Kelly. This year especially, we've had several folks, seniors that come into our office that are being displaced, that consider Acton their home, and we're doing the best we can, but we've had several seniors that have had to move out of town. We have somebody that's homeless that is in a shelter that we can't get a house for. So I definitely see the need for increased senior housing. We're at over 5,000 seniors in town at this point, and that's just going to continue to grow. And it really is heartbreaking for these people that consider Acton their home to have to move out of town, and that's what we've been seeing lately. So please take it under consideration.
Thank you, Sharon.
Hi, Claire Siska, Stowe Street. I'm chair of the Acton Dog Park Committee. I won't even attempt to articulate the needs for affordable housing in Acton for seniors and the disabled. I think there are people here that are much more able to do that than I, although you can see that I'm supportive of it speaking as a person. As chair of the Dog Park Committee, as you know, there are two sites that we've been focused on recently. That is Great Hill soccer fields and the two lower, I guess the southernmost properties, 348 and 352 Main Street. And one of our proposals, as you stated, was shared use. Actually, even just this morning, we've got some new information that was brought to our attention by the committee. We met with the Natural Resources Department and with Selby, and we got some feedback from the land stewards, and that new information has brought to our attention the considerable obstacles that we would face with the use of Great Hill in terms of impacting wetlands, parking issues, a number of those things. So the dog park, I want to just let people know, has been considered by the town. to be desired by the town. We've got 2,000 dogs in Acton. It's good for dogs. It's good for people that don't have dogs. It's good for people that do have dogs. The dog park meets the Acton 2020 goals. It meets many of the Main Street goals and those of our Natural Resources Department. So I'll try to get a little more quickly, sorry. We want to respect the varied needs of the town, and with the limited land that's available to us, we need to be creative in how we put it to use. So aside from the very compelling reasons to support the Acton housing proposal, I want to point out that the Director of Acton Housing Authority, who met with us, is supportive of co-using the property. Aside from needing the lower 2 parcels for a septic, they have no interest in the land and really no use for it, was what was stated to us. So there's no reason why a dog park can't be built on top of a septic system. Seniors would benefit from the proximity to their house, people that would like to hang around with dogs. And sorry, just one more point. There's approximately $250,000 in grants that are available for cleaning up the parcel and for dog park development, which I would hope would be appealing to the town. So we ask that you give thoughtful consideration to shared use concept for the property of the dog park plus the Acton Housing Authority proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Good evening, Danny Factor, 11 Davis Road. While I'm a member of the Acton Commission on Disabilities, I speak tonight solely as a private citizen. I do want to speak in support of the Acton Housing Authority proposal. Housing is a human right. It is clear that we have an absolute housing emergency, both in our Commonwealth and in our town as well. Whether it be in conversations with folks at the school or just within our own lives, people are reporting more and more instances of people who are homeless or housing insecure. This project is a step in the right direction, both because it accommodates seniors and also people with physical disabilities and also mental health disabilities as well. And I bring out particularly mental health because that's something that we are recognizing more and more as another crisis in our community as well. The last thing I do want to say is I think this proposal is a step in the right direction. It is not the ultimate solution. The project, from my understanding of the 31 units, I believe around 8 of them are dedicated to people whose income is 30% of the median income or less, and that's terrific. That's the population that we really want to be serving. We have many, many people in town whose only income is SSI, which is $800 a month. That will put them down in somewhere around the 10th percentile of median income. The remainder of the apartments, in other words, more than 20 of the apartments, from my understanding, are right now only available to people who are at the 60% of median income level. It's possible, depending on choices, and from what I understand in our discussion with Kelly, that the developer may have some say on this. It may be possible to allow more people who are at lower income than 60% of median income, but this is not expected to be a project that is going to be able to take in many, many people who are homeless or near homeless. It's a good step in the right direction. I support it, but we need to be taking much more bolder action in town to reach people of very low income and give them their right to dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny.
Hi. So I'm Matthew Post. I'm the direct abutter to the property at 6 Isaac Davis Way. We have, as a group on Isaac Davis Way, have reviewed your proposals, and the one that is most favorable to us right now is the senior housing for a number of different reasons, but I also wanted to let you know that the Now community proposal is probably not going to work as far as the revitalizing of Isaac Davis, because they have no access to that road. And there's a document that the previous owner had gone to court with and had given up all rights to that. So there's no access to that road at all. It's only for emergency purposes, so it can't be used. And so I think that right now, if these are our options, the best one would be the senior housing.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yep.
Hi, Nancy Tavernier, Chairman of the Acton Community Housing Corporation, and I have a practical question. I know that the Acton Housing Authority project can only be constructed with a comprehensive permit, a 40B, but I don't understand how the Now project could be constructed without new zoning in place or a 40B.
Right, so we would probably, part of the town meeting vote, again, like I said, would depend on what the proposal is, and we would, depending on what it is, potentially have to also propose changes to zoning, or if they went through the 40B process, which they have been, they had said they could think about as well if they had 4 of the units as affordable, although their purchase price of the land would go down probably around that $1 million.
Yeah, because they'd have to provide 25% affordable units. But, so you would you would propose an overlay zoning piece?
Potentially, yeah.
And it wouldn't be this town meeting, for instance?
Well, yeah, probably, well, it could be, it'd be tight, we'd have to figure it out, if we'd be able to do that or not for this town meeting, or a fall town meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy.
Peter Barry from South Acton. I have a question about the Housing Authority's proposal. Is it $500,000? I'm a member of the Community Preservation Committee, so I'm coming at it from that perspective. Is it $500,000 from the Community Preservation Committee they'd be asking for? I'm wondering why they structured it that way rather than just purchase the property for $500,000.
I can let Kelly, if she wants to, speak to that a little bit further, but I think part of it is that the CPA is a source of funding. We asked them to look, we asked all of the folks to look at, what are the sources of funding that you would use to make your project financially feasible, and the CPA is a source of funding for affordable housing. And having the money, the purchase price would go back into the town's free cash, which is where the purchase of the money to purchase the land came from originally. So I think that would be part of it.
Well, it's all tax dollars. I guess if it comes out of the CPA, it doesn't affect the tax rate.
Right.
So the CPA is set at a certain rate, so, okay. Right. Also, in terms of accessibility for people with disabilities, would there be a certain number of units set aside that are fitted out for people who have severe mobility problems, say electric wheelchairs, they need roll-in showers, they need doors that open when you push a button, and that kind of thing?
I'll let Kelly answer that. Do you mind just going to the microphone? Sorry, Kelly, thank you.
Our goal is to have this be accessible housing, because right now the senior housing that was built in Acton in the 80s was built with no elevators, and seniors have to go upstairs to the 2nd and 3rd floors, and they were built with bathtubs. So the goal would be to have all these units have showers that are accessible showers, to have an elevator so people could go, with mobility issues into all of them. And I think the goal is to have it be 100% accessible, but for limited mobility, wheelchair accessibility, it would be a minimum of 10%, but probably more.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And just so you know, Kelly from the Acton Housing Authority is here, and Dan from Now Communities is here, so that if people do have questions like this on the details of the proposals, we can throw it to them.
Okay, thank you. I would also encourage the committee to look at some way of, in terms of conceiving this as a gateway to the town center. It certainly has close proximity to the Hosmer House. which is, I'm noticing they're cutting the trees there, that the school, on the school land to open up visibility to the Hosmer House. They have a grant that's going to improve their facade and the front entrance to the house. I would urge the committee to look at some way to incorporate some kind of historic interpretation into the site in terms of artifacts or placards that show Acton's history to draw people to the open space site of this part of the site, possibly. I am a selectman, but speaking as a private citizen, I moved to Acton in 1988. I immediately joined the Housing Authority Board. There was a vacancy at that time. Several years later, moved on to the Acton Community Housing Corporation, worked with them for a number of years on affordable home ownership opportunities. Have worked with the Community Preservation Committee to fund affordable housing opportunities in town. So I'm very familiar with the critical need for more affordable housing, particularly for very low-income seniors. The Housing Authority deals with very low-income seniors and families, whereas the home ownership opportunities are more for moderate-income families. So personally, speaking as a citizen, I strongly urge the committee to support this option and certainly support it myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I feel like you're heading, no, sorry, I'm sorry. I thought there was a question that I was going to answer, and I don't remember what my answer was.
I mentioned historic piece. I don't know
yes,
if
that's what I was
anybody
thinking.
has raised that.
It's been a long week. The committee, as I mentioned, Doug Herrick is on the Historical Commission and is a member of the committee, and that's certainly a piece of this that we've talked about. And again, I think in both the now, and all three of these, the now kind of keeping it as it is or improving it, and the Housing Authority do have open space that could have options for informational kiosks or other things, and it's certainly a concept we have talked about.
Okay, thank you. I also had the thought that the site is very well placed for seniors who hopefully will be able to walk down the street to our brand new Kelly's Corner shopping center.
I'm Dr. John Blute. I'm an almost retired orthopedic surgeon who's lived in Acton for 38 years, and I'm just beginning my knowledge of some of the town issues that are going on. I don't think there's any question that the AHA proposal has powerful reasons to consider. I'm delighted to hear about the senior disability support that will be intrinsic to this. I would also encourage, if this proposal moves forward, as I am familiar consulting with other, if you will, for-profit senior centers, such as Newburyport and others, that there be resources within this community, if this comes to pass, for activities, commonality of food, exercise, rehabilitation, and a number of other factors that might be entirely appropriate for this age group. But I think your early ideas are very good. The second corollary to that is that in addition to this area might get to be a resource for other seniors in the community, because as we're seeing both nationally and internationally, society is struggling with isolation and loneliness as our population changes to some degree. And we haven't established, as England has, the Minister of Loneliness, but there is a factor there, because that leads, isolation leads to anxiety, depression, and other expensive healthcare consequences. I do want to ask you both and others here, since I'm not familiar with it, what will be the follow-up dollar consequences, the expenses, if we move forward with AHA? I'm sure some of that assessment has been done. We've learned we've learned that this has to be septic, this system. This is not serviced by sewerage and other things like that. But there may be other consequences. The other secondary consequences are transport for seniors and other consequences of this situation. So there's a tough phrase in our society about following the money.
Sure.
And I think that might be important to look at part of your proposal as you move forward to final decision-making.
Sure, and I'll say this, the what I presented tonight are very abbreviated versions
Yes.
of the proposals that we saw, and the full proposals are all available online. The Housing Authority's proposal does include costs baked in for ongoing maintenance and other issues like that. It also talked about the integration of services and the connections to the resources that Kelly works with. Those, as Sharon, our Senior Center Director, noted, and others, services and resources that we have in town. So those are a little more fleshed out in the full proposal, but it does, I would say, their financing, and part of why I think we felt it was feasible and sustainable is that it did include long-term costs for maintenance, upkeep, other things related to that. Costs in terms of, if you're thinking about costs of the town, I mean, there's always costs related to, police or fire, things like that.
Exactly.
But
Right.
the now communities, their costs would be, depending on who moves in, children attending the schools. So both have costs that, we don't, can't put a specific dollar price on without, knowing what the specific population is. I will say the cost for a child to go through our school system is not met by the property tax of that house, but if somebody who lived there that didn't have kids, I probably use, less in property taxes, because I don't have a child in the school system. So, without knowing who's moving in, you
But
can't really.
exactly that point, because those of us who hope to continue to live in Acton will have consequence of this decision-making. That's why I think this process is very good. And this is an increasingly expensive community to live in. Yes, many of us are fortunate that we're not in the situation that you're talking about with respect to the AHA, but there are consequences, particularly after the tax cut and tax changes that occurred fairly recently. So thank you. I'll try to pursue the information. It might have been appropriate to have a printout of that tonight. But do appreciate your requesting input and getting that in this process.
Great, thank you.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. First of all, this is a 2/3 vote no matter what, except for the do-nothing option. Either of these projects would require a 2/3 vote to dispose of the property, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, yes.
Okay. And looking at the picture here, I can't see whether there's a drive under. I do a lot of work with disabled seniors, and so I think there should be a drive under so that you can drop off and whatnot. And looking at the picture, the larger picture, I feel like entrance might be better to be put on the front side so it looks like a school campus or something like that. Again, back to the loneliness thing. I feel like integrating the community into some of these projects as opposed to having isolated, groups of people here and isolated groups of people here. The Minister of Loneliness would object, I think. And the idea of having, I know it might cost more money, but a community center there or a small store so that we can go to them and they can stay there as opposed to having to walk all the way down to the Kelly's Corner. And folks that like the cottages, yay. I'm hoping that we'll move forward to requiring smaller buildings and more porches. My very good girlfriend, she did her doctorate thesis on the rise and fall of porches and the connection to loneliness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Faith Erickson, Captain Brown's Lane. With all due respect to seniors, I am one of them. I'm here on behalf of the youth with disabilities, and I think what would be lovely is to combine a senior, not just seniors who are disabled, but young adults who are disabled with the seniors. I think there's a lot of synergy that can be gained from that. Seniors love younger people need older people, and I think to combine that would be ideal. A dog park? Yes, that would be lovely as well. But to just label it as a senior disabled community, I think is a disservice to what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Virginia Loftus, and I live at Windsor Green and have for almost 20 years. So not only am I aging, but the building's aging. The buildings are almost 40 years old, 38 or something close. So not only am I aging, but what we're not really recognizing is this progression. The way that things are set up now, I have to have my insurance company pay for cutouts for the bathtub so I can get in and out of it. That's $2,000. So if I didn't have an insurance company that covered that, I would be really seriously out of luck. My income is Social Security, as has been mentioned before. So there's very little that I can subsidize to make my life comfortable. There's very little that I can do. I must have a car in order to function. That's more than my rent. So this need is not going to get less in every possible way. The population, the individuals, and the buildings. That's extraordinarily powerful. That if we do not consider this heavily, I didn't get my sign on for the AHA, but if we do not consider this, there's going to be torture for many, many hundreds of people. Torture.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adam Parker, Half Moon Hill. I'm enthusiastically in support of the AHA proposal. Others have made the case for generational and disability equity and justice better than I could have. I want to commend the committee and the Housing Authority for pushing the design criteria to LEED quality to minimize environmental impact. And I enthusiastically support the project as you know, with that commitment. But I would note that both the need for energy and carbon reduction in our buildings and the technical and financial ability to do better on that have now moved the needle, and the needle is now moving beyond the current LEED standards. So I would ask that the committee, as part of its consideration, look seriously into going deeper, and in particular, not putting gas heating or gas service into the building, which will be in 10 years or so time seen to be a very bad economic choice and will need to be replaced if the country and the world are going to hit its climate change targets. So I would ask that the committee recommend not making a decision that will be seen as a bad financial decision not many years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will note again that one of our members is Cameron Cousins from the Green Advisory Board, in part because environmental considerations are important, and so we not only encourage people to use LEEDs, but some of the other environmental, I think, sites and other initiatives out there as well that go beyond that. So thank you. Any other questions, comments, anything? Because otherwise, oh, yep.
Actually, I'm on the committee. But I know how NOW works, and I know how the financing for NOW works. What sort of, who's going to pay for the housing authority's buildings? And how are they going, I mean, are you going to take a bonding? Or, I mean, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, Kelly can answer, and Ann, again, I'll remind you that in the details of the proposal,
Yeah.
there is a pretty detailed
Right,
budget of the finance mechanism.
I also think everyone should
Yeah,
know
yep.
how you're going to pay for it, please.
So I don't know if people are familiar, but we built 12 units of affordable family housing in 2012. And the cost of that, the CPA contributed towards it, and we got financing through the state and private banks. And the ongoing operating costs of those units are paid for both with project-based subsidies, tenant rents, and that's it. And we don't need any local money. The only local money doesn't go into the operating costs of the housing authority in any of our buildings. We have applied for community preservation funds to help with some of the capital costs, which have been to preserve the exterior and make them more energy efficient at our different properties. And the CPA, as everybody knows, is created to help with affordable housing costs. So that is how the project will be funded. So there's, we apply in a one-stop application for funding from the state, different pots from the state, from private banks, including Mass Housing Partnership, and tax credits.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, oh, one more.
Hi, Alma Sandman, 18 Arborwood Road. Could you just clarify where we go from here? How do we know when you're going to pick, and where's the Win Stanley Corporation this evening? I feel like, we're all of one mind here, but I'm not sure where Mr. Stanley is.
Well,
Stanley.
the committee didn't recommend moving forward with the Win Stanley option, and so we didn't invite the developer from that organization here
Okay, so
tonight.
could you just sort of draw the picture of how we get from here to
Decision.
April town meeting?
Yep,
Yeah.
so the committee, the master planning committee is scheduled to meet next Tuesday, 15th. And at that meeting, the hope is that we will have a discussion and take a vote to recommend an option to the Board of Selectmen. And then the Board of Selectmen at one of our February meetings, which are on Monday nights, and I don't have the dates of our February meetings off the top of my head, but it will be posted. At one of the February meetings, the committee would present the selected recommended proposal to the Board of Selectmen, and if the Board of Selectmen is supportive of that, then we would move forward with putting an article on the warrant for the April town meeting. And that article, again, depending on the proposal, would involve the disposition of the property, probably creating an RFP, and then if required, changes in zoning. If not, then not that piece.
Point of clarification, so the proposal theoretically would be for the AHA proposal? Like the other options
Well, it
suddenly
depends. So
disappear?
let's say the committee voted the AHA proposal and recommended that, and then
Right.
brought that to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen said, yes, we want to go forward with that, then yes, that's what we would bring. And the way that we would probably structure the article and the disposition of it is that you can write the resulting RFP for the disposition of the land in such a way that that housing authority is who could apply to that. And again, it would include the things like the purchase price of $1 million, and it might include other things related to, if there were specific, requiring specific consultations with the town on design or environmental standards, things like that, that we could put in that proposal, or in a proposal that aligns with what Now Communities has proposed or something else.
Okay.
Yes, that's sort of how it works. It's a little complicated, but that's how we get there.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, David Hoffman, Half Moon Hill. I'm delighted to see the community support for this project, and including the abutters. It seems to me that the rather modest commitment of town resources insofar as the differential of tax revenue is concerned is a very welcome contribution to underserved, under-resourced communities that have been shunted aside in terms of benefits available from the federal government. And I teach a course on diversity at Harvard Law School. I'm not here on behalf of Harvard University by any means, but I do want to reflect on the benefit for the town, the benefit for all of us in living in a more diverse community. The older members of our community, the disabled members of our community have so often been shunted aside, their voices not heard, their contributions not welcome. And I'd like to think that I live in a community that's willing to devote resources to including them, supporting them, and benefiting from the wisdom, insights, contributions that they have to make to us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bernice Buran. I'm a member of the Housing Authority Board and also a member of the ACHC Board. I want to thank the people who are here who have expressed such positive opinions of our proposal. We came to this meeting uncertain as to what would happen and apprehensive that our proposal might not be favored by much of the community. The board has worked long and hard to, over the years that I've been on it, and I've been on it about 15 years, to develop more housing for needy populations in Acton. And we're aware of how long it takes and how many diverse sources of funding are necessary and how many layers of approval are necessary before any proposal can be approved. So I really, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of the board, I know I am. I'm very appreciative of the people who have spoken and who I hope represent general town opinion on this matter.
Thank you, Bernice. Okay, so I don't see anybody else. I think what we'll do is just try to do, we had said we'd do a sort of voting mechanism, and I think we'll do that by having people raise their hands. So I'm gonna ask Selby to count the people on this side, and I'll count people on this side. So I'll just say each of the three, and then just raise your hand for what is your preferred option. The three being leaving it as is, the Now Communities proposal, or the Acton Housing Authority. So if your preferred option is the optimizing the current use or leaving it as is, if you want to raise your hand. Okay. Okay. If your preferred proposal is the Now Communities proposal, if you could raise your hand now. Okay. And if your preferred proposal is the Acton Housing Authority, if you could raise your hand. And now this is all right, this side's good. Might be a rough estimate, but. right, so we had about 66 people, I believe, that preferred the housing authority, 3 for now and 4 for optimizing the current use. So we will take, as I said, all of that information as well as what's in the detailed proposals back to the Main Street Master Planning Committee. We will meet on Tuesday night and hopefully take a vote then. That is a public meeting and open to public. It's, or will be posted on the town's website, the information about where we're meeting. I believe it's at 7 p.m. in room 9 of Town Hall. So you're welcome to come to that if you'd like. And then stay tuned, and hopefully in February you will see a presentation to the Board of Selectmen. Yes, Claire. 7 p.m. on the Tuesday the 15th, yes. And thank you all very much for coming tonight.